Are you struggling to make an API call with parameters in Angular? You're not alone. Today, we're diving into how to properly use the HTTP GET method with parameters, and I promise, by the end of this video, you'll have a clear understanding. I totally get it. It can be really confusing when you're trying to pass parameters in a GET request. Many developers face this challenge, and it can feel overwhelming. But don't worry, we're here to simplify it. Let's look at the specific question that brought us here today. One user asked, how do I make an API call to a method that requires a parameter using HTTP GET? They provided a code snippet that looks like this. A method called getSupport that takes an integer parameter called projectId. Sound familiar? Let's break it down. So, what's the deal with GET requests and parameters? Typically, GET requests are used to retrieve data, and they can include parameters in the URL. However, when you're using Angular's HTTP client, you need to pass these parameters correctly to ensure your API call works as intended. And stick around. At the end of this video, I'll share a pro tip that will make your API calls even smoother. To make an API call with a parameter using the HTTP GET method, the user should start by constructing the URL with the parameter included. This is essential for the server to recognize which project ID is being requested. Next, the user should create the headers for the request. This includes setting the content type to application JSON. However, the project ID can be passed as a query parameter in the URL instead of in the headers. Now the user can make the GET request using the HTTP client. They should ensure that the project ID is included in the URL as a query parameter. Finally, the user should handle the response from the API. This can be done by subscribing to the observable returned by the GET request and processing the data as needed. Fun fact, did you know that the first web API was created in 2000? It was a simple way to allow different software applications to communicate. Look how far we've come. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative approach shared by another user involves setting headers and parameters for the HTTP GET request. They create a function to set headers, including an authorization token from local storage. If parameters are provided, they map through them to include in the request. Now, let's see a response from a different user. An alternative approach shared by another user involves using the HTTP params class for handling parameters in API calls. They provide a reusable API service that simplifies the process of adding query parameters to GET requests. That's it for that answer. Let's take a look at another one. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests using a method that constructs a query string for the GET request. They define a function called getSupport, which takes a filter object as a parameter and appends it to the API endpoint as a query string. Here's the pro tip I promised. Always ensure your API endpoints are well documented. This will save you time and headaches when you're trying to figure out how to pass parameters correctly. And there you have it. You now know how to make an API call with parameters using Angular's HTTP client. If you found this video helpful, please hit that subscribe button for more tips and tricks. And remember, practice makes perfect.